What's good, YouTube? Storm here, coming at you guys in another video today. Today I'm going to be doing a new project, kind of an update on a video I did a while ago asking if link summoning was a mistake. So this is kind of like an overview of the link mechanic as it's gone on, and I think it's safe to say that the link summoning mechanic, there were a lot of poor design decisions with this mechanic. The biggest being, like, if you've played Yu-Gi-Oh any period of time, you know people have pet decks, and they don't like, and that was the biggest problem with the initial way link summoning was designed. If you were playing a pet deck that needed to summon multiple extra deck monsters, you would have to summon a link monster first. So it basically felt like Konami was telling people, you can't play your pet deck anymore. And this also led to another line of thinking where, especially with the Link Brains 1 cards, where they almost overcompensated for the fact that, hey, we hit this mechanic, let's give them a Link monster that helps them out, and that created things like Halkify Brax and all these other problematic Link monsters that we'll get to. So I do think that the adjustment to the new Master Rule update in April of 2020, where they removed everything but the changes to the pendulum, the pendulums. So I think that if it would have gone that way, I think it would have been perfectly fine, because under the old rules, pendulum magicians were still perfectly playable, because of things like Oath Dragon, and once Election Might came out, a lot of those pendulum strategies would definitely be playable again. I think if they had done that, I think there would have been much less of a negative reaction to the announcement, and it would have felt a lot less like a cash grab, because if you're playing any kind of deck, you would have to have these new link monsters, and that was kind of the biggest problem, I think. With the other thing, I believe, is that I feel like the mechanic is way too generic. It's effectively synchro summoning without needing the tuner. So that's the other thing. And also the fact that you can make link monsters with tokens, as we're going to see in a moment, it caused a whole list of problems. So the first thing we're going to see, this is an entire compiled list. I would like to thank RCFD from Shiggy's Discord server, the allegedly a Yu-Gi-Oh Discord server, for helping me compile this list. But he helped me put this list together, so I would like to thank him for that. You can obviously see how many cards are here. These are all there's 16 banned link monsters, which is more than any other extra deck mechanic. I think XYZ is the next closest with 12. And then we also have some link monsters that were freed from the ban list, but Firewall Dragon obviously caused so many problems it needed an errata before it came back. And Rusty came back mostly to help push the new Phantom Knight support. And then of course, Mirage Stalio came off the list. But it was originally put on there because to kind of curb Salmon Great's consistency. And Drident was another one that came off, was put back on just because it caused some more problems because of Tri-Brigade. So as you can see, this is an insane number of cards just for one mechanic. If we're talking, strictly the ban list itself, there's also pretty much every card from Barrage to Grinder Golem. So we're talking another 13 cards or so were on the ban list because of links. So effectively, a third of the ban list, almost 30 cards, is purely because of link monsters, and we're leaving things out that are debatable, like Dark Matter Dragon, for example. And possibly like number 86 is another one, and that's leaving those two cards out. But we'll go ahead and get, enough time. Let's talk about some of these cards and why they were banned in the first place. We're gonna start with the ones that were unbanned, but were banned. O-Lion and Jet Synchron were banned in the wave of tuners that were put on the list because Halkify Brax was coming out. This was obviously a reason why Konami did not want to bring Halkify Brax for a very long time, because a lot of the things that happened in the OCG came and happened to the TCG. People started playing Jet Synchron and tuning in every deck, go into Halkify Brax and start combos, and it caused a ton of problems. Same thing with O-Lion, Destrudo, I think to a lesser extent, because Destrudo was also an issue because it could make Ancient Fairy Dragon, and it caused problems. And also was the Phantom Knight Dark Link deck that was running around. But to a lesser extent. So we're even cards that aren't on this list would also. And then obviously, there were a ton of Pendulum based support that was placed on the ban list purely because of Heavy Metal Foes Electromite. Double Iris Magician and Joker were banned in the initial wave almost immediately after Electromite came out, because that deck was insanely consistent. It gave a really consistent way to pop Double Iris going first, which is always something Pendulum that the deck struggled with. You had to use things like Tornado Dragon or cards like Wavering Eyes that were not necessarily very good. So Konami kind of understood that interaction was a tad bit too strong. So both Joker and Iris, and Joker is obviously an insanely powerful search card. And Astrograph Sorcerer was obviously banned because of Electromite and being able to summon multiple. You could use Astrograph up to six to seven times in a turn, just from looping it with multiple Electromites and Starving Venoms. So obviously it's glad it's off the ban list. It's probably my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh card, but it definitely earned its ban just because of the interaction with Electromite. The Engage, I don't think this card really needs an introduction. If you played during TOS format, you remember how ridiculous Engage was. They kept nibbling around the problem until they finally banned it, but they brought it off the list to 1, where I think it's in a pretty good spot right now. But obviously, we don't want to go back to those engage nonsense. As far as cards that are off the ban list, Firewall Dragon, I think was obviously the poster child for Lynx, and I think it was a really poorly designed card, because before the errata, every time a monster at point 2 left the field, you got a special summon, and its effect to be able to cycle things back to the hand from the graveyard meant that you, even at 1, you could just cycle cards back to your hand to then spam again. And especially with things like Ibli, for example, because Ibli you could normal summon the Ibli and then bring something back, and then after cycling it back. So there was just a lot of really just disgusting combos with Firewall Dragon. I think it's the poster child. I think if Firewall Dragon had not been so powerful when it was initially revealed, I think the Link summoning mechanic would have been a lot less problematic. But a lot of the issues, I think, come back to Firewall Dragon. And Rusty did cause a lot of issues with a lot of the Orcus decks that are running around, but we'll get to that in a moment. Just because you could climb into it off of Galatea, so it was always kind of caused a lot of problems. Briefly mentioning the rank up because it's not here. Rank up launch, I believe it's called. This was a card that was also banned. I think they banned it before they banned Rusty. And it's off the list now. Obviously, they do have a new rank up spell as well. But the fact that Pendulum decks could summon Arai's Rebellion Dragon and then use this on it to make a Kali Yuga and just lock their opponent whole board down, it could be a really problematic card and hard to play around. And if you're playing against Orcus, they could also use it to go from a Dingirsu into a VFD, which would also cause problems. So you're kind of seeing a pattern here. But as far as some of the that about covers, I think, all the non-banned cards on this list. But you're seeing some of the issues some of these Link monsters created over time. And then Sprite Elf. Doesn't really need an introduction, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I think we understand how annoying the Elf Toad thing combo was. The fact that they could keep bringing Toad back over and over and over could get really, really irritating. And the fact it gave targeting protection, it was a generic extender. You have too many good level 2 monsters like Diviner the Herald and Herald of the Orange Light and Tears, of course. And then you have, Tears even have their own level 2 monster. Then, of course, you have Sprite itself. Definitely earned its ban. And we're going to moving on to the Nightmares. Goblin was basically in fact, it was just an additional normal summon, much like with Seraph Knight. You had to have it in a main monster zone, obviously, because it had to be normal summoned to a zone it points to. But that really didn't matter, because with all these Link summoning decks, with Firewall Dragon, you would recycle back the Nightmare Corruptor Ibli, then normal summon, use your extra normal to bring Ibli and normal summon it to Goblin Zone, and then it would bring back another Nightmare. And it was just an insanely strong extender, and it also gave the whole Nightmare U-Lock combos before the rule changes. It gave the extra link combos an additional protection, because this was an era where we didn't have things like droplets that didn't, generic things that don't target. So their boards would effectively be unbreakable, because of this card. And Mermaid was always a problem because obviously it does summon Ibli from the deck, but it also summons Orcus Nightmare. It really just turned a lot of these decks into these generic combo enablers, and like any deck, if it had an ability to go into a Link 2, could then go into Mermaid and do the whole Orcus combo after doing all their other stuff. So definitely earned its ban for a good reason. Summon Sorceress was probably one of the most generic extenders we've ever had in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Being able to, it was super duper easy to make. You could make it often in Solda. When this came out, it just broke Gokis even more, because they were already really strong. But if you had something like, even though they did play Call by the Grave at 3, but if they had any, this basically made Droll like not as good against the deck. You really were going to struggle, because now they had another extender on top of it, and they could go into it straight off at Isolde, and then Summon Sort could go into Firewall Dragon. So Summon Sorceress was definitely earned her ban. Cool, artwork beautiful, definitely earned her ban. Hulk, I think if you played last while it was around, I think you fully understand why Konami didn't import it for so long. It caused so many problems. It gave pretty much every deck that could play it, go into it, access to access code talker, because Selene exists. So yeah, and it just was like an enabler for a lot of these really stupid decks. Link Cross, I think, is sort of in the same boat of these Hulk hits, but it's still a really strong card. Yes, you can't link the tokens away, but you can still use them for synchro summoning and fusion summoning. I've used them for in some cases. Definitely earned its ban. Gumblar came out, I believe it was Nationals weekend. This was when I went to Nationals, and it was such an important combo piece, because if you had it, gave you a massive advantage, because you could knock cards out of your opponent's hand before they could even play. If you're able to go into Gumblar, and you would typically leave a level 1 on the board, and you would trigger this first and then trigger it again using the Link Rebo. Obviously earned its ban. When they printed this card, they knew it was going to get banned. It's that simple. Curious was always anything that's like a generic Foolish Burial effect probably should be banned. If we can't have Lavalval Chain, we definitely shouldn't have this. It was banned to a hit quote unquote tier, but the interaction with Griffin, I think, was always one of the bigger problems, because you could effectively search a floodgate and then go into Griffin and then set the floodgate to your field, especially when when Order was around. It could get very irritating. Then the Guard Dragons, I don't think if you played during the Agripane, was essentially a free Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss when you did all the Guard Dragon combos, and LP was really could summon anything from the deck. It could summon Equipped Wyvern, but even when that was banned, it could also grab Brotar from the deck, which would search Chaos Dragon Levianeer. I think that kind of speaks for itself. Like, LP definitely earned its ban. It should have been banned way sooner. Auroradon, if you guys remember, it was the Halka-Fibrax. There were a lot of Halka-Fibrax combos using this card. Definitely, you could do it in almost anything from Dinos to all these other different decks, just because you could go straight in. Because I think a fix for this issue might have been to possibly, I think the summoning condition was just a bit too generic, and the fact you could go into it right off a Hulk was a problem, but I still think this thing would be a problem, honestly. Miyamu was banned last year during the adventure, there were adventure Prank Kid decks running around, and Prank Kids they're effectively becoming like the new Burning Abyss, where people are invoked where people didn't know what to play, so they kind of kept falling back on Prank Kids, and because Miyamu existed, so I think that was firmly, they were just put Miyamu on the list and were like, go away. So I think it's probably earned its ban as well. Verte, I think if you played last year, not too much to say here. Every deck having access to, either Dragoon or GPE was a problem. Not too much to say. Simorg was banned as a hit on Bird Up. Bird Up was the Lyra Lusk Tri-Brigade deck that was running around. You would, on top of it, gave not only the targeting protection was one of the things that made it strong, because it meant your opponent couldn't use things like Infinite Impermanence or Effect Veiler on any of your searches. And if you summon them underneath Simorg's arrows. And on top of that, it would get the search on the end phase. They would, on top of everything else on their board, they would also get a free Avian. And if you didn't get rid of it, it summons during every end phase, so you could summon another Lyra Lusk from your deck, and usually I think Cobalt Sparrow, and then get another search. Definitely, I think earned its ban, but it wasn't really an issue until it was the fact that Tri-Brigade, if you opened like a copy of Fractale, you could bring this out, and it not only was it an extender, it was also a blanket targeting protection for the things that pointed to, which caused a lot of problems. Union Carrier, I don't know what they were thinking when they designed this card. It's not really designed to work with. It could work with ABC, but I really just think they should have just made it. Just give it a fact that searches Union Hanger. That's all they really needed to do. Like, if it did anything else, that would be a bonus. But obviously, this, if you remember, this thing could equip the Buster Dragon from the deck and lock your opponent out of the extra deck. And there were also a lot of other combos people would use. People would attach things like Thunder Dragons to monsters and then link the monster that the Thunder Dragon was attached to off, and then get the effect. So you could do that with a lot of graveyard-based decks. So it was definitely earned its ban. And the final link monster we're going to talk about is Heavy Metal Foe's Electromite. I think this card, if you play during these formats, needs no explanation, but essentially, like, it allowed you, it fixed a lot of the problems with the pendulum mechanic. It gave you an easy way to trade scales back and forth between your extra deck. It gave you an extra draw, and it wasn't once per turn. So when it and Starving Venomer was around, you could essentially set up entire FTK boards just with those. If you started spamming Electromites, definitely. Personal opinion, obviously, as a personal bias, as someone who plays pendulum decks, I would like to see it come back, but I fully understand that Konami's probably going to leave it there just because they will. So, but kind of moving on to some of the other bans, Grinder Golem. There, I don't think we ever really quite saw this combo in the TCG because we got Security Dragon so late. We did get a Cosmic Magician in like the second set, but Grinder Golem, I think, was banned before we really ever, because essentially what you would do is you would summon Grinder Golem to the zone that you were going to summon a Akashic Magician to. You would get 2 tokens, special summon the Akashic Magician. The Akashic Magician would bounce the Grinder Golem. Then you would special summon the Grinder Golem again, and then go into Security Dragon, bounce the Grinder Golem. You get the idea. The thing was, you would use it over and over again in the same turn and get, consistent free link pluses. Amaryllis was banned because there was a couple of cards are on the ban list because of interaction with Topologic Bomber Dragon. Essentially, you could, there was a plant FTK deck that would go into Topologic Bomber Dragon, and when you hit the end phase, Amaryllis would bring itself back, and it would burn and it would keep bringing itself back because it would be destroyed by a Bomber Dragon's effect, bring itself back, burn your opponent. And when the FTK went off, you would have all 10 plants and this in your graveyard. So it was a pretty consistent FTK to pull off. We never really saw it in the TCG though, because they took us so long to import Jasmine over here that we never really saw that FTK, and they just went ahead and banned it before it became an issue. Gofu was a card that was really popular in some Metal Foe variants and some variants that played of Dark Synchro that were running around, because it was a level 5, so you could target it with Level Eater and bring Level Eater back. But links are what really broke Gofu open, because you could use tokens to link summon. And of course, we never had Gofu with Halka Fibrax, but obviously that's another interaction. I don't see this ever coming back, unless they change how link summoning works. But I always loved Gofu. I used to play it like in Malphos, but I fully understand why it's banned. Master Plan is was a card that when it was originally printed, there wasn't an efficient way to summon it or get it in the graveyard, so you couldn't really trigger all the search effects it has. But the card is still insane because when you interaction with Double Helix, you could just special summon it from the deck with Double Helix and then link it off and then activate its effect to search a Spiral mission, which would usually be Rescue, and Rescue when it's in the graveyard can be banished to special summon a Spiral back. So you would have, if you had a quick fix somewhere, you would link summon Master Plan away, get the double search, you would get the Resort Search and the Spiral Search, and then you would use Quick Fix's effect from the graveyard to special summon itself, and then discarding the Rescue that you search with Master Plan, then banish the Rescue to special summon the Master Plan. It was a pretty effective way to get abuse Master Plan multiple times in a turn, and it turned Spirals from this deck that was not good to a tier 1 deck overnight when that card came out. It was I think it finally got the axe though because of Magician Souls. I think was the final nail in the coffin. The fact it was a dark spellcaster, and even with one Resort and one Quick Fix, and the deck was still hanging around because Nightmare Unicorn came out, and it gave the deck away to shuffle the field spell back so you could get this double search off. It was probably her time. I fully understand that I would rather them got rid of Double Helix, but I get it. Dandelion, it really wasn't an issue until Link Summon, but the fact that it was a level 3 in the OCG, they had the plant, a lot of the good stuff Link deck, you would send this with, or in any plant deck, you could normal summon Mathematician, send Dandelion, and go into Aromatherapy Jasmine. You could use Cherubini to send it to the graveyard, and we didn't really ever see those decks because by the time Dandelion was long banned by the time those cards came out. But I think it was smart to get rid of it. Was at 1 for a very, very long time before they finally banned it. But I think Link's kind of, just once per turn token generators really couldn't be around. Level Eater, I was surprised it stuck around as long as it did, but Links are what really put the nail in the coffin for Level Eater. Dark Synchro was a really strong deck before the Link changes, but the fact that you could play any deck that summons a high level monster and then just keep bringing Level Eater back and keep extending into more and more Link monsters basically put the final nail in the coffin for Level Eater. I don't think it's ever coming back without a once per turn errata. Glow Up Bulb was banned, another Hulk target that's still banned in the TCG, but honestly I would like to see it come back with Hulk banned. But the Hulk combos were so strong that people were playing 3 Glow Up Bulbs in their deck and normal summoning Glow Up Bulb because that would trigger the whole Hulk, an entire combo, just one Glow Up Bulb normal summon. Even though it was once per duel, it was that strong. But Bulb was a card that had come off the list years ago, and I think without Hulk it wouldn't be a problem. Samsara Lotus was a card that there was some kind of FTK loop with Topologic Bomber Dragon. I'd never really seen it in action, but it was yet another card that was banned because of Bomber Dragon. Eclipse Wyvern was banned because of these guys right here, the Guard Dragons, because it's not once per turn, and there were so many different ways to trigger it. You could trigger it up to 2 to 3 times in a turn and get all of the level 8 dragons out of your deck that you needed. Just an insane card. It had been around for a very long time, and it was just, I think, it was always problematic. We can go back to Dark Matter Hieratic Rulers, but I think that was finally the nail in the coffin for that card. Then we have Scythe, recently banned, probably should have been banned a long time ago. Because of Dagda, it was an extra deck lock that was really consistent. Not too much to say there. Harpor, I honestly think this could probably come back at this point, but it was banned because it was you could grab an Orcus monster straight from the deck, and it was obviously that could be really good for those kinds of decks. The Dark Lock really wasn't a restriction if you're playing things like Phantom Knights. Ronin Totem, it was banned so they could bring subs to be a quote-unquote hit on sprites and the frog engines that they played, but also so they could bring Substitoad off the list, because Substitoad grabbing this from the deck could be infinite Link fodder if used correctly. So I'm not saying it would be good, but I would rather have Ronin Totem than Substitoad, but whatever. Zodiac Barrage was banned because it went to 1. It was at 3 for a while, but then with Tri Brigade, when they brought Dryden off the list, they put this to 1. But the problem, it became a problem because it effectively, you would think you'd stop Tri Brigade, but if they opened the barrage, they would then proceed to do their full combo anyway. So it was kind of becoming a very sacky card, and I think probably earned its ban. Like a lot of E-Telly-like cards. Then for the last few monsters we're going to talk about today, Tempest Magician was banned because of Celine, because I don't think I've seen that. There's Tempest Magician FTKs have always been a thing. It's just the fact that they were Celine and a lot of the new Endymion cards enabled them to be pretty consistent. They banned this right before Celine came out for good reason. So Tomahawk was just a ridiculous like link extender, particularly when we were talking about the Firewall Dark World FTK. Being able to get 5 tokens for free and then link climb was just dumb. The card was never a problem, but obviously link summoning made it a problem. Invoker has always been an issue. It was an issue during Zoo format. It's just always been this weird, just free generic extender, and but I think Goki really finally was just the nail in the coffin where they finally got rid of it, because it was a warrior. So if you had any 2 level 3 monsters, you could grab a Goki straight from your deck and then go into Isolde, get your Goki search, and get your Isolde effect. So it was just a bit too much, and I think, you know, rightfully earned its ban. Starving Venom was banned initially before they hit Electromites 1 to kind of like curb some of the... It got rid of the Lyrilusk, your FTK using the Lyrilusk monster, and I think the copying effect is obviously really strong, but it was mostly banned because of Electromite. Like, it was around at 3 for a decent chunk of time before Electromite came out, and it wasn't a problem. Ib was used in some Dragon Link variants, and obviously, like, in some ways it's stronger than Dinglong, which is still on the ban list. But I think it's pretty fair to say Ib was... you would search the World Legacy Guard Dragon, and then Guard Dragon would not only move your Guard Dragon monsters to set up the combo properly, it could also be another extender. Dryden, the second time around, was definitely banned because of Tri-Brigades and all those decks, like, because they already had Zeus Turbo plays, but the fact that they could also make Dryden going first was getting a little ridiculous. So next time around, it was just mostly just hit banned again to curb some of those Zodiac Tri-Brigade decks running around. But that about comes to the end. I know this was a bit of a longer one today, but I feel like if you've gotten a message here, it's that link summoning effectively like changed how it broke so many cards that I think that there's a lot of changes that I personally would have made to the mechanic. There's certain monsters that definitely cause problems across the format, but personally, I would say if they would have started with the ability, if they would have made it so people didn't, they just made the pendulum changes and didn't restrict the other extra deck mechanics, I think it would have been fine. I think if they had also maybe restricted link monsters from being made with tokens outside of specific cases, I think that would have also been a good idea. So that about comes to the end of the video today. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think that link summoning was a mistake? Should it have been changed? Anyway, let me know down in the comment section down below. And as always, I thank you guys for watching. It's Warstorm signing out.